Meanwhile, the love between the middle-aged couple was going well in their own way. They liked it, even though younger people might think it was boring. Lord Cumnor was very happy about the news he heard from his wife at the Towers. He thought he helped make the match happen just by talking about it. His first words to Lady Cumnor were, "I told you so. Didn't I say that the match between Gibson and Claire would be good? I don't remember being this happy. You may not like matchmaking, my lady, but I am very proud of it. After this, I will look for more matches for the middle-aged people I know. I won't bother with young people. They are too choosy. But I did well this time, so I want to continue." "Continue with what?" asked Lady Cumnor dryly. "Oh, planning. You can't deny that I planned this match." "I don't think your planning will do much good or harm," she replied with calm sense. "It gives people ideas, my dear." "Yes, if you talk to them about your plans, it does. But you never talked to Mr. Gibson or Claire, did you?" Lady Cumnor suddenly remembered how Claire saw the letter from Lord Cumnor, but she did not say anything about it. She let her husband talk. "No, I never talked to them, of course not." "Then you must have strong powers, and your thoughts made them do it, if you want to take credit," continued his wife. "I really can't say. It's no use thinking about what I said or did. I'm happy with it, and that's enough. I want to show them how happy I am. I will give Claire something for her wedding clothes, and they can have a breakfast at Ashcombe Manor House. I will write to Preston about it. When did you say they were getting married?" "I think they should wait until Christmas. I told them this. The children would like going to Ashcombe for the wedding, and if the weather is bad during the holidays, I'm afraid they will be bored at the Towers. It's different if there is a good frost, and they can go skating and sledging in the park. But for the last 2 years, it has been so wet for them, poor dears. And will the other poor dears wait to make a holiday for your grandchildren? To make a Roman holiday. Pope, or someone else, has a line of poetry like that. To make a Roman holiday," he repeated, happy that he remembered a quote. "It's Byron, and it has nothing to do with what we are talking about." "I'm surprised you quoted Byron. He was a very bad poet," said Lady Cumnor. "I saw him take his oaths in the House of Lords," said Lord Cumnor, trying to defend himself. "Well, the less we talk about him, the better," said Lady Cumnor. "I told Claire that she shouldn't think about getting married before Christmas. And she shouldn't leave her school too quickly either." But Claire did not want to wait until Christmas. This time, she got what she wanted without many words or a big fight with the Countess. She had a harder time changing Mr. Gibson's wish to have Cynthia come to the wedding, even if Cynthia went back to her school in Boulogne right after the wedding. At first, Claire said it would be wonderful and a great idea, but she worried about the cost of Cynthia's travel. Mr. Gibson, who usually did not spend much money, had a kind heart. He showed this by giving up his future wife's small property, which was about £30 a year, to Cynthia. He also planned for Cynthia to live with him as his daughter when she finished school. He gave Mrs. Kirkpatrick 3 £5 notes, hoping this would help bring Cynthia to the wedding. At first, Mrs. Kirkpatrick thought it was a good idea. If she had written the letter and sent the money right away, Cynthia would have been at the wedding. But many small things stopped her from writing the letter. The next day, Her motherly love was less, and she thought the money was more important. Money had always been hard to get for Mrs. Kirkpatrick, and she was used to being away from Cynthia, so she loved her less. She convinced herself that it was better not to interrupt Cynthia's studies. She wrote a letter to Madame Lefebvre, who agreed that Cynthia should stay at school. Mr. Gibson, who did not know much French, was sad but accepted it. However, the £15 were not returned. In fact, not just that money, but also a large part of the £100 Lord Cumnor gave her for her wedding clothes was used to pay debts at Ashcombe. The school was not doing well under Mrs. Kirkpatrick. It was good that she chose to pay off her debts instead of buying fancy wedding clothes. Mrs. Kirkpatrick always paid the shops where she shopped. It was one of the few good things about her. She was always worried until she was out of debt. But she did not mind using her future husband's money for herself. She bought new clothes that would impress the ladies of Hollingford. She thought that linen and underwear were not important because no one would see them. She knew that every dress she wore would be noticed and talked about in the small town. So her stock of underclothing was very small and almost none of it was new. But it was made of nice material and carefully fixed by her skillful hands. Many nights, after her students were in bed, she worked on it, deciding that in the future, someone else would do her simple sewing. Many memories of being under others' control came to her during these quiet hours. She decided she would never suffer like that again. People often look forward to a different life, thinking it will be free from problems. She remembered a time this summer at the Towers after she got engaged to Mr. Gibson. She spent over an hour fixing her hair in a new style she learned from Mrs. Bradley's fashion book. She thought she looked very good and was ready to see her fiancé. But Lady Cumnor sent her back to her room to do her hair again, like she was a little child. Another time, she had to change her dress to one she thought was less pretty, but Lady Cumnor liked it better. These were small things, but they were examples of what she had endured for many years. Her liking for Mr. Gibson grew because he was her way to escape these problems. After all, this time of hope and sewing, mixed with teaching, was not bad. Her wedding dress was safe. Her former students at the Towers were going to give her the dress. They would dress her from head to foot on the happy day. Lord Cumnor had given her £100 for her wedding clothes and told Mr. Preston to arrange the wedding breakfast at Ashcombe Manor House. Lady Cumnor, a little upset that the wedding wasn't postponed until her grandchildren's Christmas holidays, still gave Mrs. Kirkpatrick a good English-made watch and chain. It was more useful than the small foreign watch she had worn for so long. Her preparations were going well, while Mr. Gibson had done nothing yet to prepare his house for his future bride. He knew he should do something, but what? Where to start when so much was messy and he had so little time to oversee it? Finally, he decided to ask one of the Miss Brownings, who were old friends, to help prepare what was needed. He would leave the more decorative touches to his future wife. But before asking Miss Brownings, he had to tell them about his engagement. The townspeople thought his frequent visits to the Towers were because of the Countess's health. He knew he would laugh at any middle-aged widower who came to him with such a confession. But it had to be done, so one evening he went in promiscuous, as they called it, and told them his story. At the end of the first part, that is, the story of Mr. Cox's young love, Miss Browning raised her hands in surprise. To think of Molly, whom I held as a baby, having a lover. Well, really? Sister Phoebe, she was just coming into the room. Here's some news. Molly Gibson has a lover. One can almost say she got a proposal. Mr. Gibson, can't one say that? And she's only 16. 17, sister, said Miss Phoebe, who liked to know all about Mr. Gibson's family. 17 since June 22nd. Well, if you like to call her 17, said Miss Browning impatiently. The fact is the same. She has a lover, and it seems like she was a baby only yesterday. I hope her love story goes well, said Miss Phoebe. Now Mr. Gibson came in. His story was not finished, and he didn't want them to misunderstand Molly's love situation. Molly knows nothing about it. I haven't told anyone but you two and one other friend. I scolded Cox and tried to keep his feelings under control. But I didn't know what to do about Molly. Miss Eyre was away, and I couldn't leave them alone in the house. Oh, Mr. Gibson. Why didn't you send her to us? Said Miss Browning. We would have done anything for you, for your sake and her dear mother's. Thank you. I know you would, but it wouldn't have been good to have her in Hollingford during Cox's love problem. He's better now. His appetite came back double after he stopped eating to show his feelings. He had 3 helpings of blackcurrant dumpling yesterday. You are very generous, Mr. Gibson. 3 helpings. And probably lots of meat too. Oh! I only mentioned it because with young men, they often choose between eating and love, and I thought the 3rd helping was a good sign. But still, what happened once could happen again. I don't know. Phoebe had a marriage proposal once, said Miss Browning. Hush, sister. It might upset him to talk about it. Nonsense, dear. It was 25 years ago, and his oldest daughter is already married. I admit he hasn't been loyal, said Miss Phoebe, in her gentle voice. Not all men are faithful to their first love, like you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Gibson felt uncomfortable. Jeanie was his first love, but he never mentioned her in Hollingford. His wife, whom he loved and was sensible, wasn't his second love. And now he was going to talk about his second marriage. Well, he said, I felt I had to protect Molly from such matters while she was young and before I agreed. Miss Eyre's nephew got sick with scarlet fever. Oh! I forgot to ask. How is the little boy? Said Miss Browning. Better now, but that's not important. Miss Eyre couldn't come back to my house for a while, and I couldn't leave Molly alone at Hamley. I understand now why you suddenly went to Hamley. It's quite a story, said Miss Browning. I do like hearing about love stories, whispered Miss Phoebe. If you let me continue, I'll tell you mine, said Mr. Gibson, annoyed by their interruptions. Yours, said Miss Phoebe, surprised. My marriage, I hope, said Mr. Gibson, taking her surprised expression literally. That's why I came to talk to you. Miss Phoebe felt a little hope. She had often said to her sister that the only man who could make her consider marriage was Mr. Gibson. She felt she should accept him for her late friend Mary's sake. Phoebe nervously played with her apron strings. Like in a story she read once, many possibilities went through her mind in an instant. But the most important question was, could she leave her sister? Focus, Phoebe. Listen to what is being said before you worry about something that might not happen. It was hard for me to decide who should be the lady in charge of my family, the mother of my daughter. But I think I've made the right choice. The lady I picked. Tell us who she is, said Miss Browning. Mrs. Kirkpatrick, said Mr. Gibson. The governess at the Towers that the Countess likes? Asked Miss Browning. Yes, she's well respected by them. She runs a school at Ashcombe and knows how to manage a household. She has looked after the young ladies at the Towers and has a daughter, so she might be kind to Molly. She's very pretty, said Miss Phoebe, trying to say something nice to hide her true thoughts. I've seen her in the carriage with the Countess. Very elegant, I must say. Nonsense, said Miss Browning. Her looks don't matter. Widowers marry again for practical reasons, not looks, right, Mr. Gibson? They need a housekeeper or a mother for their children, or they think their late wife would approve. Maybe Miss Browning thought Phoebe could have been chosen, as there was sharpness in her tone. Mr. Gibson didn't want to argue. You can think what you want, Miss Browning. I want my old friends to like my future wife. I care about you and Molly more than anyone else. Also, can Molly stay with you until after the wedding? You should have asked us before asking Madame Hamley, said Miss Browning, still upset. We're your old friends and her mother's friends, even if we're not wealthy. That's not fair, said Mr. Gibson. You know it isn't. I spend time with Lord Hollingford because of work, not because I like him more than our other friends. And I go to Hamley for Molly's sake. Miss Browning didn't give in easily. I value Lord Hollingford for who he is, regardless of his rank. I'd seek him out even if he were just a school usher, carpenter, or shoemaker, as long as he had a similar character to his current one. Mr. Goodenough is a smart lawyer, but he's only interested in local matters. Let's not argue. It gives me a headache, said Miss Browning. I didn't mean what I said. I'll take it back. I'd rather not argue. What were we talking about before? We were talking about Molly coming to visit us, said Miss Phoebe. I should have asked you first, but Cox was causing such a fuss with his love. I didn't want him to bother Molly or you. But he's calmed down now. Distance has helped. And I have another favor to ask. The house needs fixing up for Mrs. Gibson. It needs painting, wallpapering, and maybe some new furniture. I don't know what to do. Could you help with that? I have £100 to spend. Would you be willing to help an old friend? Miss Browning loved having control over money. She hadn't had much chance to use her father's money since he died. This task made her happy, while Miss Phoebe looked forward to Molly's visit.